Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today, I was thinking about what to do, what to go over, and you know what sounded like a brilliant idea I got from my Discord server? Was going over the damage per pip and kind of the average scale of it throughout the game, because as I mentioned with my life video, I mentioned the fact that life has an insane amount of heal per pip, which is disproportionate to their damage per pip, and I definitely want to stress how that definitely made life a little bit broken in some cases. So I was like, you know what I can do? I can make a stupid spreadsheet like I usually do, one that isn't actually how you make spreadsheets, and I know that people who actually make spreadsheets are like, no, what are you doing to my eyes? And I still don't care. But I made a little spreadsheet going over some of the most important and vital spells throughout the wizard career, and then their damage per pip. There's some stuff, some outliers, so I wanted to analyze that and kind of go over whether I think a lot of this is balanced. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this time I included some colors and a key to make this more easy on the eyes so you don't get, confused and or blinded by it. But you can see here, it's really easy. An overtime is in italics, an AoE is highlighted yellow, a healing spell is highlighted green, and then a heal back spell is bold. So I kind of tried to make it easy. And then how I set this up was I did the 1 pip, which gives us kind of like a basic, like what KingsIsle originally had planned for the school's balance to be in terms of their base damage on spells. Their 4 pip spell, their 7 pip spell, their 10 pip spell, there's 5 pip shadow spell that you get in Darkmoor, the Scion, and then finally the new Lemuria spell. And then I included some extras at the bottom for more used spells that I know people might be interested in. For the first 1 pip spell, you can see Fires is 100, Ice is 85, Storms is 125, Life 85, Myth 90, Death 85, Balance 85. So you can kind of see how they originally planned for the spells to be laid out, with Storm having the most amount of damage, Fire having the second, Myth having third, and then everything else kind of trailing behind them, but being around equal. This is what they originally planned for the schools in terms of the base damage, and I feel like you can get a pretty good feel for that. I would have done the 2 pip spells as well to further cement that, but I'm pretty sure it would end up looking incredibly similar. So obviously that's interesting, but nothing revolutionary. Now we get into some of the more interesting things, which are the 4 pip spells. Now for these, I had to be fair. I had to go based on the actual 4 pip spell. So what I did was obviously the 4 pip AoEs for everyone except for Life and Death, who can't get theirs at that level. So you can see Life has their Satyr and Death has Vampire, which is incredibly funny and weak. So you can see Fire's Meteor Strike is 81, Blizzard is 67, Tempest is 80. Obviously that's what Tempest is, 80 per pip. The reason why I would think it's not higher than Fire's is so that it's not unbalanced, because if it was 100 per pip, it would be a little bit crazy. You know, the ability to do 1400 also at 7 pips would be more powerful than Stormlord. A bunch of different reasons why it's not 100 per pip. Life is at a massive 215 because this is a healing spell. I very much tried to make it obvious which spells are healing spells because they have a much higher on average pip than other spells as a whole. And while I've gone over that before and I've said it's a little bit unbalanced, I don't think it's necessarily that unbalanced. It looks worse than it is here. I definitely think healing spells could be reduced, but not by a ton. Myth is 73, Death is obviously 83 at Vampire, so it's a little bit higher than the others because it is a single target spell. And honestly, this actually shows just how weak Vampire is now. Vampire used to do more damage, and then they nerfed it, and now it's at only 83, and then finally Balance at 66. So interesting enough, you can see that Balance has technically the weakest. Actually, it probably should be the same as Ice. I think it's tied with Ice. I think I just did the rounding different on both of them. The rounding on this is completely random, by the way. I just rounded to whatever number felt pleasant in my mind. It's about right. It's like within 1 point of damage here. Next is the 7 pip AoEs, and these are obviously some of the most important data because 7 pip AoEs are what is used the most common in this entire game. I doubt that there is any other spell that's used more than the 7 pip AoEs. So Fires is at 1012, which is higher than the others by a significant amount because it is an overtime, so keep that in mind. Ice is at 65, Storm is at 98, Life is at 94, Myth is at a nice even 100, Death is at 84 with heal back, and Balance is at 95. So what I thought was the most important thing to look at here is the fact that Ice is severely underpowered compared to the other ones, and I think that this is something most people know. Frost Giant is incredibly weak for some reason. I don't know why, it just is significantly weaker than a lot of these other 7-pip AoEs, which is a shame because it should be a bit stronger than it is. You can see on average, comparing to where it should be, Ice is usually around Balance's level, and this continues throughout most of the actual list itself. But you can see it kind of falls off with Frost Giant, which is a bit of a shame. In terms of other outliers, I don't think there's anything too big besides the fact that Myth is higher base damage than Storms, which is strange. Still don't know why they did that, but it's there. It exists. The one thing that this doesn't take into account is the hanging effects like stunning and whatever, but realistically on these, stunning doesn't do anything anyway because stuns are useless in this game. That's why I didn't include them in any way. That's probably why Storm's base damage is lower than Myth's, but again, I don't think that that should be the case because stunning is useless. Next, we have 10-pip, and I just kind of did this just for the interest of it. You can see Fire is 115 in AoE, Ice is 88, Storm is 140 with Storm Owl. Obviously, that's going to be insane. Life is an AoE with an overtime at 116. Myth is at 95. Death is 101 as an AoE as well, with an overtime. And then finally, Balance is at 85. So you can kind of see the trends that's following here, and the reason why I included this is you can see that Ice and Balance tend to be a bit tied. Death has been getting a little bit stronger over time, I've found. Storm is obviously tends to be number one, and then Fire following them. Next, we have the 5-pip Shadow Spell, and obviously this needed to be included because this is where things actually take a turn, and really the damage per pip is upped massively because obviously to get a Shadow Pip, it takes more time. So you can see Fire's is at 200. This is when Fire starts getting a little bit crazy. Ice is at 177. Storm is at 188, but it's an AoE. Life is 170, Myth is 127 but an AoE, and Death is 135 but an AoE and a heal back. And finally, Balance is at 134. So one thing I'd like to point out here, and I'm going to give more broad strokes later, but this really illustrates in my eyes that Mystic Colossus is super underpowered. Mystic Colossus is objectively like not a good spell at all because when you are actually waiting for that Shadow Pip, it takes way too long to get a Shadow Pip, and then the damage is pretty mediocre as well, especially it's underwhelming compared to the other Shadow spells. And then Death, I think, is also a little bit underpowered. I think Cthulhu is just, it's very so slightly better than Scarecrow, and I definitely think it should be a bit more. If I had control, I would probably hike these up a little bit. So Myth is maybe in the 140, 150 range. Death is in the 140 range. I think that that would be a much more balanced in my opinion. I think both of their 5-pip Shadow spells are a little bit underpowered. I think most people would agree with me. I know people like the kind of remove shield effect from Mystic Colossus, but it's really not that useful, especially when you have Pierce. Just overall, I think that's a problem. Also, Balance is incredibly weak here. You can see they didn't follow the lines where Ice and Balance are usually tied. For some reason, Ice is much more powerful than Balance here. I don't know why. I think they nerfed Gaze of Fate even further in a recent update. It's just this weird, like, there's certain weird oddities of these spells where it just doesn't seem balanced, which I don't really understand. Next, we have Scion. The left number is base Scion damage per pip, and then the right is when it does the 2x effect. Fire's at 102, Ice at 84, Storm at 127, Life is at 161 because it's a healing spell, 91 for Myth, 77 for Death, and Balance is 86. Now, I think the reason why Death is so weak here is because of the fact that it is a heal back. I do think it's a little bit weaker than it potentially should be. I still think it should be stronger than Ice's and Balance just based on trends, but you can see it's a bit weaker. I think that that's literally just because of the heal back, to be completely honest. Life is obviously stronger because it's a heal, but otherwise there isn't anything too interesting. Finally, we have the Lemuria spells, and these ones are pretty interesting. We have Fires, which is an AoE overtime at 159, 133 for Ice AoE, 159 for Storm's base spell, Life is 120 AoE, Myth is a 213 overtime, Death is 148, and finally Balance is a 126 AoE. That's it for the initial stats. Now, what I really wanted to talk about this video and what I wanted to look into was, is this balanced and how's the balance going? So you can see at the bottom there's the numbers. What this is this is literally just a sum of all the numbers together, and this helps kind of display the data. So you can see in terms of the full average, Life has the highest per pip. That's because of the healing spells. If you discounted the healing spells, they're probably more around Myth or Death's range. Storm is obviously up there with Storm. They should be the highest. Fire's next. That also makes sense. Followed by Myth, Death, Ice, Balance. I think that this is pretty much what you'd expect. The only thing that I'd say should maybe be flipped would be Ice and Balance, and I think that's because Balance got kind of screwed with Gaze of Fate. But you can kind of see this is around what it should be. Now, some people might say, no, you shouldn't include the healing spells for Life, and you should move Life down based on their other spells, but I think that that would be discounting how powerful Life is in terms of their per pip. I think their healing spells are much more powerful than they objectively should be, and I think that that shows here. If you remove Satyr and replaced it with potentially Rat Spin, maybe, that would be the only thing you could replace it with. If you just did that, Life would probably drop down below Myth, if my mental math is basically correct. In terms of these extra spells that I just wanted to include down here, you have Inferno Salamander. The reason why I included this is because I know it's really popular in PvP, and a lot of PvP players use it, and I know that it is a little bit broken, and you can see that. It's 138 damage per pip, and it's an overtime, so it can be a bit busted. Headless Horseman is 140 damage per pip, which I just thought was really interesting because it is one of the highest damage per pip 4-pip spells in the entire game. It's only beaten out by Satyr, and that's because Satyr's a healing spell. Ship of Fools, and this is max upgraded path, does either 75 damage per pip with a heal back, so it's still higher than a lot of the 4-pip AoEs, or it does 93 to all enemies, which is higher than any 4-pip AoE, and Rat Spin is also 93. And what I really want to point out is that that does actually show kind of that Ship of Fools and Rat Spin are pay to win, objectively, because they are the strongest AoEs in the game, and you can't get them without paying, especially at a lower level. So overall, to wrap it up, what is interesting and why did I entirely make this video? Well, I really wanted to show the data and show the balance of it. And I really wanted to say whether I think that this damage per pip system that KingsIsle has been doing is balanced. Well, I would say, yes, I do like the balance of it. I like the base spells, and I think that the base spell balance is okay, with a few obvious exceptions. Like, I think Ice is a little bit underpowered in certain areas. Like, definitely Frost Giant is way weaker than it should be, and that would show Ice would be even lower if it wasn't for the fact that Abominable Weaver hikes up their stats quite a bit. For the 5-pip shadow spells, I think both Mystic Colossus and Call of Cthulhu are pretty weak and definitely need adjusting. And I think the overall thing is that yes, this system can work, but every spell needs to be balanced around it, and some spells just blatantly aren't. And I think that that's definitely an issue, and that's a problem, especially when your payment spells are stronger than the base spells. That shouldn't be the case. That's really all I wanted to go over today. Let me know what you think. Is this data interesting to you? I'm curious to what you guys think about the actual data. Was it interesting to you? Do you dislike it? Do you think it's not balanced in some cases? But that's it. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Adios.